So, Dr. Ann Kristin Glenster, with your deep inside experience, should we be terrified or delighted in what our technological future holds?
Well, thank you. And thank you for the invitation to come and talk today on this very important topic. I think that Lord Bruce has already set out a lot of the context for what I can remark on. First of all, I must say that as a researcher, I can't necessarily offer solutions, although I'd like to, but I can say something about what we know or think we know something about. And I've been asked to talk about the dangers and difficulties of this complex picture, because other speakers will talk about some of the opportunities for democracy. And I thought I'd cover 3 points. Number one, starting with us as voters, as citizens, we know already of the problems with digital and particularly unregulated social media platforms, but now even with generative AI. So the Center for International Governance Innovation in Canada published a report last year that showed that of the countries they had surveyed, multiple countries, 80% had seen election interference through digital media. And 90% of that was content creation, so fake news, mis and disinformation. And then 24% was content proliferation, meaning virality, meaning pushing content through these channels onto social media and other internet users. And then 3% only hyper-targeting, which is personalization. This will change, and I suspect hyper-targeting is going to increase tremendously. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we have an online digital space that's flooded with inaccurate, misleading information about elections and what politicians stand for or not. We saw the Bolsonaro election in Brazil in 2022 being heavily criticized for publishing or using inaccurate information about their opponents. But we've seen also more subtle uses of information, such as the Alternative for Deutschland presenting nostalgic pictures of Germany that have been doctored without disclosing that appropriately as recently as last year. Now, I say that to illustrate how these techniques are now getting more sophisticated and harder to spot. And that's the first thing to think about. The second thing is generative AI, deep fakes, cloning. We can no longer tell what is true or not. And so our evidence at Cambridge shows that this leads to a sort of epistemic disorientation, where people don't trust even the real news or the real information or the truth information because they can't tell the difference. The Financial Times told me yesterday that they are concerned about generative AI, where the users can personalize the news and also set the tone, so that there could be a critical, satirical tone for their news that is actually accurately reported, which also may influence voters. So the kind of information, how it is spread and how it's personalized is huge. Second, digital sovereignty. Now, this is what Lord Bruce told us about. We are seeing a shift in geopolitical relations in terms of the regulation of our digital sphere. And we are seeing the US very much using social media and media platforms and tech companies as leverage in their trade regimes that they're imposing. Politico and Reuters have reported that the US administration has threatened sanctions for EU officials working on the Digital Service Act. As part of this, we know there's a huge discussion about digital taxes, service taxes, and so on. And as a countermeasure, we saw the Draghi report come out in November last year that said that as a countermeasure, that Europe needs to build its own tech stack. But for that, Europe needs to get its act together in terms of finance, and it needs to close the innovation gap. Whether it can do that or not is an open question. But we see that no matter then what we as voters get of information, we may not even have access to the media channels to give us that information to begin with. And then third, and the one thing we haven't touched on and perhaps we'll get to, is military capacity. Because we see AI changing also very much military capabilities of nations. We see how drones have had a massive role to play both in the conflict in the Gaza and also in Ukraine. And so who gets to control those capacities may also very much determine what kind of democratic institutions and countries we'll have in the future. So where does that all lead us? Well, it leads to a moment of peril. I would call it almost an epistemic crisis in terms of the disorientation. But nevertheless, I do have faith in all of us and in our ability to take responsibility and reclaim or strengthen our public institutions for democracy. Not to my knowledge. I understand your question. I mean, there's always been, lies and discreditation. But I think that what historically, going back to 200 years you're talking about, which is modern democracies.
Yes. I was almost thinking about Luther and Wittenberg, but when Caxton and the printing press and that sort of technological development.
But if we go from the American Revolution onwards, if we go from there, I think that what we've much more seen concerns about has been gerrymandering, and rotten boroughs and those sort of things. It hasn't been the sort of actually epistemically disorienting the voter. We've seen some of it with Modi, the hologram. That was a huge breakthrough of using of technologies where he had the holograms going around all of India. The way Barack Obama used social media definitely turned a corner, but that was necessarily to confuse voters. And I now think that is as much of a strategy as trying to persuade voters to come onto a particular side.
Yes, I mean, there's a question here, I think, that reflects on what we're discussing here by Rimjin Sud. Can the panel, can you comment on the integrity of elections in the light of AI's ability to generate and spread so much dis or misinformation?
Well, this is a complex question for several reasons. Because we don't know. I mean, one of the problems with Cambridge Analytica that we all remember, where Facebook had access to American voters' Facebook profiles and were able to target personalized ads to them in the first Trump election, 2016. We don't know how much that actually sways voters. So I think we need to be cautious too about thinking that we're all empty vessels, that as soon as something pops up, we will think, oh gosh, this is a good idea. Yeah. But yet, if we're completely isolated, it is an issue. The warning from history, recent history, is the way the radio was used during the Rwanda genocide. I think.
Yes.
1994, right?
Yeah, exactly. That was before any of this existed, wasn't it? Where they were told to kill the cockroaches on the radio, and other people were talking about freedom of the press, which I often quote in the freedom of the press arguments. I think, but that is a different thing to what we've got now, isn't it?
Yeah. But the Rwanda one is the one that I think is maybe closest, because then you have a sort of single source, and that's what we're seeing now with personalization. Suddenly we get one kind of message and we don't get the sort of reality check of different voices or necessarily media and news that has been verified.
Before I let you go, can I ask another question from Prashant Kumar? I'm not quite sure I understand it, so I will read it out exactly as it is. Existing biases may be encoded into AI systems, but what about new biases? How might this impact the democratic processes?
Oh, this is a fantastic question. Yes, they may. Now, so the way I read it is we know that no technology is value neutral. We know what kind of data a system is trained on will have biases in it. The way it's labeled will have biases. The data that is not there will represent a bias. Now, the problem with generative AI is, of course, that it creates inferences. And that synthetic data that the system creates may have biases that we cannot know beforehand. So I think that is a massive risk. And thank you very much, the person who asked the question, because it's a great question.
Yes, it's brilliant. So are we talking here about, say, Google versus TikTok, if we're talking about political biases?
No, we're talking about, let's say you have something like OpenAI, and they have scraped from the internet tons of material, and they've also come across in databases that is biased, that's racist, or that is whatever it is that we would think of as not valuable in a democratic process. And then because of the volume of that, when you ask with prompts, that system, tell me something about the community in X country, for example, it might hallucinate, it might give you the wrong thing, and therefore a bias within that data set that was originally scraped that we don't know about.